The knock on my door that night sounded like death itself had come calling. Hard, sharp, too deliberate to be a neighbor asking for sugar. I remember my hands trembling before I even reached the handle. And when I opened it, there he was, a stranger, standing in the glow of the porch light, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. In his hand, a single folded letter, edges worn as though it had been carried for too long. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked, his voice low, hesitant. I could barely nod. Something inside me already knew this wasn't ordinary. It wasn't a salesman, not a lost traveler, not anything so simple. My heart was pounding the way it did the night my son left home for the last time. He held the letter out like it burned his fingers. "This is for you." I took it, my breath catching. His eyes, they didn't quite meet mine. Almost like he couldn't bear to. And before I could ask a single question, he turned and walked down the path, swallowed by the storm. I stood there frozen, rain soaking the hem of my nightgown, staring at the paper in my hand. I didn't open it right away. I was afraid. Afraid because deep down I knew this was connected to my boy. To the silence he left behind. "Why did you leave, Daniel?" I whispered into the night, but the only answer was the wind. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not your mother, not your aunt, not even your grandfather when he was alive. That letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I found the courage to break the seal. 3 days of pacing, praying, arguing with myself. By then, years had passed since Daniel had slammed the door, his eyes full of fire, his voice hoarse from shouting words I can still hear. "Don't you dare try to stop me, Mom. You don't know the truth. You've never known." That was the last thing he said to me in this house. He didn't take much, just a duffel bag, his old jacket, and that restless anger. I remember watching him disappear down the road, certain he'd call, certain he'd come back. But days turned to months, months to years. And silence became my new companion. When I finally opened the letter, my hands shook so badly I could hardly read. The first line stole the air from my lungs. "Mrs. Harper, I promised Daniel I would come to you only when the time was right. That time is now." I read those words over and over. I couldn't even process the rest at first. Who was this man? How did he know my son? And why did he think now was the right time? The letter spoke of things hidden, of reasons Daniel had left that night, reasons he couldn't speak aloud. It spoke of betrayal, not by me, but by someone closer than I dared imagine. I dropped the page like it was poison, pressing both hands to my chest. My ears rang. Betrayal. Someone close. Who? The kettle screamed on the stove, but I hadn't even put it there. My mind was spinning, dragging me backward into memories I'd buried. I remember one evening, years before Daniel left, we were sitting at the dinner table. Your grandfather had been in one of his moods, silence stretching like a shadow across the meal. Daniel was 16 then, stubborn as ever. He broke the quiet with a challenge. "Dad, why do you always shut us out? Why can't you just talk to me for once?" Your grandfather's fork scraped hard against the plate. "Mind your tone, boy." But Daniel wouldn't. He had fire in him. He always did. "It's like you're hiding something. You don't even look me in the eye anymore. What are you so afraid of me finding out?" I can still see your grandfather's jaw clench, the muscle ticking. He didn't answer. He just stood and walked out, leaving his plate half full. Daniel turned to me then, eyes wide, pleading. "You see it too, don't you, Mom? You know something's wrong." But I said nothing. What could I say? I was caught between the two men I loved most, their silence pressing me into silence of my own. That night after the letter came, I couldn't sleep. I sat in this very chair, watching the rain slide down the window, my fingers tracing the creases in the paper. I thought about every fight, every slammed door, every time Daniel looked at me as if begging me to choose his side, and how often I stayed quiet. I wanted to tell you children something important here. Silence can be its own betrayal. Not speaking when you should, not asking the hard questions, that can cut deeper than angry words. But back then, I didn't see it that way. I thought I was protecting the family by keeping peace. I didn't realize I was feeding the storm that would one day carry my son away. Grandma, you asked me once, why do you always pause before answering questions about Daniel? I laughed it off then, said something about old age and memory. But the truth is, I pause because I'm sifting through the weight of everything unsaid. Because even now, decades later, the words still taste like ashes in my mouth. The night after I read that letter, I dreamed of Daniel. He was standing at the foot of my bed, older than when he left, older even than you are now. His eyes were tired, but softer, and he said just one thing. Mom, it wasn't your fault. But you need to know. I woke with tears soaking the pillow. That morning, I made myself read the rest. Every word felt like a stone dropping into water, rippling through my chest. The letter said Daniel hadn't run away just for freedom. He hadn't left because he hated me. He had discovered something about his father, something that shattered him, something he couldn't bring himself to speak of to my face. And whoever wrote this letter, this stranger who had appeared on my doorstep, claimed to have been there when Daniel made the decision to leave for good. I folded it carefully, smoothed the edges, and pressed it to my lips. My heart ached in a way I can't describe, like a wound reopening after years of scar tissue. And then, children, I did something foolish. I swore to myself I would uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Even if it meant turning against the memory of the man I'd shared my life with. That's how it began. A knock on the door. A stranger's face. A letter that cracked open everything I thought I knew about my family. And I am telling you this now because secrets rot in silence, and I won't leave you with rot. But if I tell you everything, everything Daniel tried to protect me from, you must promise me one thing. Promise me you'll listen all the way through, even when it hurts. Because once the truth begins, there's no stopping it. The house felt different after that letter. Quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of quiet that presses on your chest, makes every creak of the floorboards sound like a warning. I kept hearing that stranger's knock in my head, echoing again and again. I kept seeing his eyes, how he wouldn't meet mine, how quickly he left. Almost as if he was afraid of what might happen if he stayed a moment longer. For days, I went about my chores like a ghost. The laundry, the dishes, sweeping the porch, it was all just motions, my mind caught in that swell of memory and suspicion. Every sound of the clock ticking felt like time daring me to face the truth. One evening, your mother came by with the children, her laughter filling the hallway the way it always does. She found me at the kitchen table, the letter lying just inches from my teacup. Mom, she asked softly, eyes narrowing at the sight of the paper. What's that? I slid it under a magazine, too quickly. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Nothing important, I said, forcing a smile. Just some old mail I forgot to sort. But she didn't believe me. You know how your mother is, sharp-eyed, like her brother used to be. She tilted her head, studying me the way Daniel once did. Mom, she said again, her voice lower now. If it has to do with Daniel, I deserve to know. Her words cut through me. I wanted to tell her, I really did. But something in me clung to the silence, the way I had always clung to it. Not out of strength, but out of fear. Fear that saying it aloud would make it real. So I lied. I told her it was just some insurance notice, nothing more. She didn't push, but she looked at me the whole time she made the tea, her back stiff, her hands moving in short, sharp gestures. When she left that night, I sat staring at the door long after it closed. I could almost hear Daniel's voice again, echoing down the hallway. You see it too, don't you, Mom? You know something's wrong. Yes, Daniel. I see it now. I see it clearer than ever. But back then, I didn't have the courage to face it. The memories kept coming, uninvited. One in particular rose up like smoke from an old fire. It was the summer Daniel turned 18. Hot days, the kind where sweat clung to your skin no matter how many windows you opened. I'd been canning peaches in the kitchen when I heard raised voices from the garage. Don't go digging where you don't belong, your grandfather's voice thundered, deeper and harsher than I'd ever heard it. I'm not a kid anymore. Daniel shouted back. You can't keep shutting me out. I know you're hiding something. What is it? Who are you, really? I remember wiping my hands on my apron, rushing outside, the smell of sugar and peaches still clinging to me. They were standing nose to nose, father and son, the air between them charged like lightning before a storm. Your grandfather's fists were clenched at his sides. His eyes, oh, children, his eyes were wild in a way that made my stomach twist. Daniel, I said, stepping between them. Enough. Both of you. Daniel's face was flushed, his jaw set. He looked at me like I was his only ally. Tell me the truth, Mom. Please. You have to know something. But I didn't answer. I reached for his arm instead, trying to calm him. He pulled away, anger sparking in his eyes. You're just as blind as he is, he spat. And then he stormed out of the garage, leaving me standing in the thick, suffocating silence beside a man I suddenly realized I barely knew. I didn't think much of that fight back then. I told myself it was just father and son, clashing the way generations always do. But the letter dragged it back into my mind, every detail sharper now, every word carrying new weight. What was my husband hiding? What truth did Daniel discover that I didn't? And why, after all these years, was someone still keeping the secret alive by sending me that letter? The following Sunday, after church, I sat alone on the back pew long after everyone else had gone. The stained glass light poured over me, reds and blues painting my hands. I whispered a prayer, though it felt hollow. God, show me what I'm supposed to do with this. Show me how to carry it. And in that quiet, I thought I heard my own voice answering back, not God's, you've carried silence long enough. It's time to speak. That night, I gathered you children around in this very living room. The fire was crackling, the shadows dancing across your faces. I looked at each of you, and for the first time, I almost told you everything. But when I opened my mouth, only fragments came out. Your uncle, he didn't leave because of you. He didn't leave because of me, either. There was more to it. More I didn't understand. Then what was it, you asked me, your voice so earnest, so eager. I froze. The truth burned in my throat, but fear sealed it shut. You'll know someday, I said instead. When the time is right. I saw the disappointment in your eyes. The same disappointment I used to see in Daniel's. And in that moment, I hated myself a little for it. For repeating the same pattern of silence that had torn this family apart. The letter still lay folded on the table, its words etched into me. It spoke of betrayal, yes, but also of protection. Daniel had left not just out of anger, but because he believed leaving was the only way to shield me from what he had uncovered. That thought cut me deeper than any wound. My son had carried the burden alone because he thought I couldn't handle the truth. Because maybe I never gave him reason to believe I could. Do you know what it feels like to realize your own child lost faith in you? It's like standing in front of a mirror and finding a stranger staring back. I remember the night he left as if it happened yesterday. The suitcase on the stairs. The argument echoing through the walls. Don't you dare try to stop me, Mom, he said, voice breaking. You don't know the truth. You've never known. He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes were wet, desperate, as if begging me to push past his words, to reach for him. But I didn't. I let him walk out. That memory haunts me more than any other. Not because he left, but because I didn't run after him. And now, here I am, years later, holding a letter that proves he was right. I didn't know the truth. I still don't. But I will. I owe him that much. I've started searching. Old boxes in the attic, records buried under dust, even whispers from neighbors who look away too quickly when I ask about my husband's past. And children, I have to tell you, what I've found so far is darker than I ever imagined. But before I take you further down that road, I need you to understand this: secrets don't stay buried forever. They surface, whether you want them to or not. And when they do, they don't just change the past. They change the present. They change everything. I found the first crack in the wall of silence one rainy afternoon, digging through old boxes in the attic. Dust swirled in the air, thick enough to sting my eyes. The smell of mothballs and old wood clung to me as I pulled out a battered trunk I hadn't opened in decades. Inside were the usual relics: photographs, faded letters, your grandfather's army jacket. But buried beneath a stack of yellowed newspapers was a smaller box, locked tight with rusted hinges. I pried it open with a screwdriver, my heart pounding like a drum. Inside, I found papers that didn't belong. Documents with names I didn't recognize, places your grandfather had never spoken of. And then, a photograph that froze the blood in my veins. It was Daniel. Younger, maybe 12 or 13. But standing beside him was a man I had never seen before. A man who looked far too much like your grandfather. My hands shook as I turned the photo over. On the back, in Daniel's messy handwriting, were 4 words: he told me everything. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the picture, the letter, and the documents. My tea went cold beside me. The house felt heavy with secrets. When your mother stopped by the next morning, she caught me again, papers spread out in front of me. "Mom," she said, her voice sharp now. "You can't keep brushing me off. What is going on?" I swallowed hard. My mouth felt dry as ash. "I think your father. I think he had another family. Or at least another life. Something he never told us about." Her face drained of color. She pulled out a chair and sat down, staring at me like I had just spoken in another language. "No," she whispered. "Dad wasn't perfect, but he wouldn't." I slid the photograph across the table. She picked it up with trembling fingers, her eyes widening. "That's Daniel," she said. Then her voice cracked. "But who's that with him?" I shook my head. "I don't know. But Daniel knew. He found out before we ever did. That's why he left." She pressed a hand to her mouth, her shoulders trembling. I reached for her, but she pulled away, clutching the photo to her chest. "Why didn't he tell us?" she whispered. "Because I think he tried," I said. "And I think we didn't listen." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the creak of the old house, the ticking of the clock in the hallway. My mind spun with questions. Had your grandfather lived a double life? Had he fathered another child? Was that man in the photo Daniel's brother? And if so, what did that make me? What did that make our family? The storm inside me raged until I found myself talking out loud to the dark. "You should have told me," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You should have trusted me with the truth. Instead, you left me to bury your sins." I thought I heard the floorboards groan in reply, as though the house itself was carrying the weight of his silence. The following week, I received another knock at the door. Not as hard as the first, but just as heavy with meaning. When I opened it, there stood the same stranger. No rain this time, just his shadow long on the porch. You read the letter, he said quietly. Yes, I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. Now tell me the rest. He hesitated, his eyes flicking past me into the house, as though making sure no one else was there. Your husband, he began, wasn't the man you thought he was. He had secrets that stretched back years. Decades. My knees felt weak. I gripped the doorframe. Who are you to know this? He took a breath. Because I'm one of those secrets. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. His face, his jawline, the slope of his brow, it was like looking at a younger version of my husband. You, my voice cracked. You're his son. He nodded. And Daniel found me before you ever knew I existed. The world tilted under me. The porch light flickered. I wanted to slam the door, to shut him and his truth outside forever. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew. I had seen it in that photograph. We sat at the kitchen table, the stranger, my husband's other son, and I. His name was Michael. He stirred his coffee slowly, his hands rough, his eyes weary. Daniel came to me years ago, Michael said. He was angry. Hurt. He felt like his whole life had been a lie. He wanted answers, and I gave them to him. But he didn't want to break your heart, Mrs. Harper. That's why he left. He thought staying would destroy you. I pressed my palms to my face, tears sliding hot down my cheeks. All those years. I thought he hated me. I thought I failed him. Michael shook his head. He loved you. That's why he left. To protect you from this. I looked up at him then, really looked. And for the first time, I saw not just the son of my husband, but the half-brother my children never knew they had. Flesh and blood of the man I thought I knew better than anyone. My voice trembled when I spoke. Why come now? Why after all this time? Because Daniel asked me to, he said simply. Before he disappeared for good. The words cut through me like a knife. Before he disappeared for good. My hands shook around my cup. What do you mean disappeared? Where is he, Michael? Where's my son? He looked away, his jaw tight. For a long moment he said nothing, the clock ticking louder and louder between us. Finally, he whispered, that's the part I'm afraid to tell you. And children, my heart has never felt heavier than it did in that moment. Because I knew whatever came next would change everything. Michael's words sat in the air like smoke. That's the part I'm afraid to tell you. I gripped the table so hard my knuckles ached. Tell me anyway. I've lived with half-truths my whole life. I can't bear another. He took a breath, his eyes heavy with something I didn't want to name. Daniel didn't just run away. He left to protect you, yes, but also to confront our father. My father. Your husband. He wanted to drag the truth into the light. But when he did, things turned ugly. My throat closed. Ugly how? Michael's voice broke. He and our father had it out, words, shouting, accusations. Daniel was furious. He said he'd never forgive him. Said he'd never forgive the silence you kept, either, even if you didn't know. He left that night and swore he'd never step foot in this house again. I shook my head, tears blurring everything. But where did he go? What happened to him after that? Michael's jaw tightened. He called me once. Just once. Said he couldn't carry the weight anymore. That he needed to disappear. To start over somewhere no one knew his name. I gasped, covering my mouth. My son. My boy. Hiding, erasing himself from the very people who loved him. He's alive, Michael said softly. At least, he was, last I heard. But he doesn't want to be found. He doesn't want to come back. The room spun. alive. But gone. A ghost still breathing somewhere in the world. That night, after Michael left, I sat alone in the dark. The house groaned around me, every shadow heavy with memory. I could still hear Daniel's voice in my ears, still see the fury in his eyes the last time we spoke. You don't know the truth. You've never known. And he was right. I didn't. Because I had chosen not to look too closely. Because I thought silence kept us safe. I pressed the photo of him against my chest, rocking like I used to when he was a baby. I remembered his tiny fingers curling around mine, his laughter echoing in the backyard, the way he used to fall asleep on my shoulder after long days. My boy. My lost boy. When your mother came the next morning, I didn't hide the truth anymore. I showed her the documents, the photograph, the letter. I told her everything Michael had said. She sat in silence for a long time, her face pale, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Then she whispered, "So Dad betrayed us." I hesitated. Yes, and no. He betrayed us with his secrets, yes. But I betrayed Daniel too, with my silence. With my refusal to face the truth when he begged me to. She looked at me then, sharp and raw. And now? I swallowed. Now I break the pattern. Now I tell you everything, even when it hurts. She reached across the table and took my hand. It was the first time in years I felt the weight of forgiveness begin to stir in this house. That evening, I gathered you children again by the fire. You were restless, not understanding the weight of what I was about to share. But I looked into each of your faces and I knew I had to speak. You should know the truth about your Uncle Daniel, I began, my voice trembling. He didn't leave because he didn't love us. He left because he loved us too much. He carried a secret that wasn't his to carry. He bore the shame of his father's choices and the burden of my silence. And he chose exile so we wouldn't be destroyed by it. You asked me questions, voices overlapping, eyes wide. Where is he? Can we see him? Why didn't he come back? I shook my head, tears in my eyes. I don't know. I may never know. But what matters is this, he loved us. Even in leaving, even in silence, he loved us. I reached for your hands, one by one. And I need you to remember something. Secrets eat families alive. They turn love into suspicion, turn silence into walls. Promise me you won't repeat our mistakes. Promise me you'll speak, even when it's hard. You nodded, small hands wrapped in mine, not fully understanding, but someday you will. Later that night, when the house was quiet again, I lit a single candle and set it by the window. A signal, foolish maybe, but one I couldn't stop myself from making. If you're out there, Daniel, I whispered to the dark, this light is for you. This house is still your home. I'm sorry I didn't run after you. I'm sorry I chose silence. But if you ever come back, I'll be ready to listen. The flame flickered, steady against the night. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt a strange peace. Not because the story was finished, but because I had finally spoken it aloud. Children, if there is one lesson I leave with you, it is this: don't mistake silence for strength. Don't bury truth in the name of peace. Speak. Speak even when your voice trembles, even when the words cut deep. Because love cannot live in shadows. I lost my son to silence. I won't lose you too. And if one day, a stranger knocks on your door with a letter in his hand, don't wait 3 days to open it. Don't let fear steal the truth from you. Open it. Face it. And remember that family is not built on perfect people. It's built on honesty, forgiveness, and the courage to stay, even when the past feels unbearable. That is my gift to you. My warning. My legacy. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, Daniel will hear it too.